welcome to Matt and Horky. Horky? Matt?
Hello.
We're going to be talking about Resident Evil Village, a little bit of Yakuza, and Horky, when do you take breaks on games? I played a bit of Detroit, and we got some gaming news coming up. First off, let's talk about Resident Evil Village. So, I played through it. Horky, you've been hanging out on the streams. You watched ahead. Overall, I was trying to think, like, who's this game for? I think if you people were constantly telling me, like, I was judging the game too harshly in the beginning, in the middle. When I got to the end, because I feel like people really judge their opinions on games, the ending is so impactful. Because I played a lot of games that have a strong ending and suck shit in the middle, and people are like, oh, give it a chance. Why are you being so harsh? And then you get to the end, you realize, like, okay, kind of leaves a good taste in your mouth. Whereas, like, games you kind of fall off of, even if they were fun, but if you fall off, that can kind of leave a bad taste there. So, Resident Evil Village, man, I just could not connect with the story, and I know it was just supposed to be kind of funny and crazy, but I don't think they were trying to be funny, or maybe they were trying too hard to be campy. Like, there's one thing if it's an unintentionally campy funny. This was them trying to go campy funny, trying to be serious. They kind of tried to do everything, and I think that's its downfall. You know what? My conclusion is with Resident Evil Village, the more of a fan you are of the series, the more you're going to like this, because it is every Resident Evil game at the same time. It's a mansion. It's Resident Evil 4. It's Dr. X stalking you. It's horror moments. It's Resident Evil 7. It's crazy action. It's everything. It's a nice game to look at. Overall, it's a decent experience. Not really for me. If you like grounded stories, you have to be willing to put up with, like, very Japanese versions of North American stuff. So, I don't know. I think it's pretty overrated, and you really have to be into what it's doing. And I would recommend, like, watching a bit more gameplay than just the trailers, because the trailers are pretty deceptive, and the game feels like 4 different games in one. So that's kind of like my description of it just there. I would say the more you like Resident Evil, the more you're going to like it, and you got to kind of lower your expectations, especially if you've only played Resident Evil 7. Like, what did you think of it?
I mean, I think you definitely nailed it on the head with the whole 4 different games kind of aspect of it. It really is this sort of like Frankenstein's monster of, like, several different things taped together. And with the marketing, I also thought that was a little bit interesting too. Like, I was really expecting a lot more of like an intense, like more of a traditional werewolf kind of thing going on. And then when you come in, it's like it's pretty werewolfy. Like, you get some moments where it really leans into that, but then you got a whole bunch of other kind of enemies as well. And and like, it just I actually liked it. I mean, I liked a lot of the stuff going on with it. I think I liked it because I couldn't tell whether they were intentionally or unintentionally doing the things they were doing. And so for me, even though it kind of falls on its face in some places, I actually kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'd say overall it's good. It's just, for me, the game felt like it was so long, and it wasn't. And it's because it's so many different things.
True.
You know, it's like the sections feel completely removed. By the time you get to the last section, I mean, when you're just like gunning down these cyborg robot things, you're like, oh my God, it feels like a lifetime ago that I was hanging out with all these, like, hot daughter vampires. So in that way, it feels intentionally longer. And I think because the vast amount of time is more kind of like walking back and forth, and you want to make it open, you want to have this village kind of hub, which is cool. I like the way that the weather changes as it progresses through the game. I think it changes the menu, which is a nice touch and a bit of polish. But Resident Evil 7 was so much tighter, so I remember all the moments, and they could cut a lot of the fat. And there's only a few times I felt like, okay, it's getting a bit tedious. Like, because there's hardly any enemy variety in Resident Evil 7. There's so much variety here, but there's so many long moments where you're just, like, shooting these wolf guys, which are cool. The wolf guys are really cool.
Yeah.
And they come at a good time in the game when you're just getting, like, I was pretty cocky playing through this game, because at one point they give you so much ammo. You're like not afraid. The only times I was really scared were when all of a sudden my ammo dwindled. I was caught in a tight space. There's a creature that can come after you. The wolf guys, I like how they dodged. I like how they kind of swarmed you. I felt like they were hunting you. and it was kind of empowering to blow them away. And then near the end of the game, it's more like, yeah, and then this will be a spoiler review.
Yeah, I was gonna say we need to.
Actually, I don't know. I think I can get away with, as long as I don't say the thing next. Maybe not say spoiler. We can just talk in generalities of it.
Yeah.
There comes a point in the game where you get a lot more powerful too, and that was kind of empowering as well. But yeah, it just felt like it was trying to do so much that I don't know. Overall, I know I kind of lost train of thought worrying about spoiling it, but I didn't really connect with it. But I thought it was okay.
I like that roller coaster of like how sometimes you're brimming with ammo, and meanwhile there are other sections where you could be just like scrounging for stuff. And yeah, I was gonna say the pacing is very uneven. It's very inconsistent. Like that, can you remember like the intro to the game, like before you go to the castle? Like, do you even remember any of those parts in your head? Because I felt like some of that stuff was like, I mean, I can vaguely remember like, getting caught and getting dragged in and all, but like I felt like going from the beginning up to the end of the castle
Yeah.
kind of felt like one big chunk, and it felt like it was done away. Like it took a long time. It dragged to go through that. Some of it was underwhelming in my opinion in that part, and then after that, it's like another part of the game, because some of the bosses or some of the like lord sections are very some felt a lot shorter
Oh
than
yeah.
others.
Yeah. I mean, the beginning I think I remember because they used a lot of it to set up. I mean, you have the beginning set up when you're at the house before the inciting incident happens, and then they do this Resident Evil 4 tribute where you're coming to a village. Things aren't what they seem, and it's just so silly. They're trying to scare you, but it's the way Ethan talks to these people, and then the villagers kind of go through their thing. Yeah, that part, it feels like a lifetime away. And then when you end up in a castle, by the time I got to the end of the castle, I thought this could be the game if you would have just maybe extended a little bit more. And then when they end it there, you kind of expect everything's going to be as long as the castle. Then you do the workshop. It's quite short, but memorable. And I wouldn't mind doing it again. Then you go to this sort of like, the two sections after that are so. Oh, sorry. Then there's another one that's kind of short too, and it feels like you're building up, and then it's kind of over. And so the game kind of messes with your expectations. Where when you first hit the castle, if you think this is going to be like Resident Evil 7, it's going to be over too quick, and then and then the next two bosses are over before they kind of get started without a big climactic confrontation. And sometimes when they do, there were so many moments in this game where they were trying to scare you with a monster in your face.
Oh yeah.
And if you just found this, if I stand here, I'm just sipping my coffee and some monster's running around and you're like...
I remember you had a particularly good moment with one of the larger werewolves just like scampering up on like something like a raise and some kind of elevated platform that you had like descended underneath.
Yeah.
And he was just like running there in an endless loop.
Yeah, if he was running against a ladder.
Yeah.
There's another boss that can only get you on very, very, very like obvious spots, which is, it just kind of feels like they didn't take a second pass through that and go, it's kind of like, you know what happens a lot in this game? It feels like their idea, they have a really cool idea and then they go, okay, let's just make it work. And when you're making it work, you kind of need the player to play along. You really need them to have some kind of a buy-in and go, but that doesn't work when you're trying to scare people. So, and maybe that wasn't really their intent, but then sometimes they are. The game is just sort of like all over the place. By the end of this, I called it the why not game. It just felt like the developer said, why not like put this in? Why not tie this together? Why not have this? And I admire the ambition of it. And if you have a less critical eye, then, and right now I can see Kazi saying, ooh, sophisticated madness, critical eye. You're going to enjoy this a lot more. Like, and maybe I'm just too old and cynical to...
You're so old and jaded at this point. You're like,
Well, I expect like you do the work, game, not me. Yeah. So, I don't know. Overall, there's nothing like terribly bad. It just...
yeah.
You have to play along. So, I don't know, maybe if you're more into like role-playing and making it work for you, the more willing you are to work cooperatively with the game, then the better this is going to be for you. So,
Did you want to do any kind of like spoiler talk on any of it?
did you have something you really wanted to say?
Well, you kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, and I didn't really get your opinions yet on that, and I
Okay.
wanted to see what you had to say.
I'm going to put up a tag on the screen that says spoilers, and people can mute this. And all right, spoilers. Okay, so it says spoilers on the screen. And when we're done talking spoilers, I'll bring that down. And if this is the audio version of the show, I don't know what to tell you. If this is the audio
Take a
version
risk.
of the show, I will not include this. How about that? Okay, so let me get the time code here. 10:57. Okay, 10:58. Spoilers. I won't include it in the audio. All right, Horky. Spoilers.
Yeah, so I was gonna say I didn't really get your opinions on the Chris Redfield section where you actually get to play as him. That
Oh,
part
okay.
was it was such a sudden change, a huge shift in like where you were. You get stupid amounts of ammo. You have all these way better weapons, but then it also gets over pretty fast.
Yeah, and while I was playing it, I thought on paper this seems like a good idea. You're rewarding the player with this insane amount of ammunition. It's almost like a new game plus. The guns are just like comically better. There's way more waves of enemies. You're like pointing to laser things, orbital strikes. On
It's like they took a DLC and
Yeah,
they somehow like like surgically inserted it into the main game.
yeah, yeah, like a DLC or like a new game plus, where it's on paper. I think it worked, and at the time, because of the pacing, I was just kind of like over the game. And it's like, okay, I get it. This is kind of fun. Maybe if the game is a bit shorter in some sections. You know what I think is the problem is that the factory section is so long
Yep.
that if that was a bit shorter, I think I would have enjoyed the Chris part more. But I did actually, I was pretty engaged with it. And then it's kind of over, and then Ethan's back, and a bunch of story at the end. So I think it was a
Uh-huh.
really cool idea. And you're already doing so much. And it was
Why not?
why not? Why not have it in there? It's like they had some success with Resident Evil 7. It's so funny because they have the success of Resident Evil 7 being this sort of very compact horror first modernized game, and that gives them the carte blanche to just be fucking crazy again. And they really went for it. But I think for fans, they're gonna love it. So yeah, I actually thought it was a pretty cool idea on paper, and it was pretty fun. And like when you've spent most of the game, but that's the thing. It's not even really like a scarcity of resources horror game.
Mm-hmm.
So you've kind of already had a taste of that. I don't know. I thought it was pretty neat. It was something new. It was like, how can we get a new weapon in? Let's fucking bring something in from space. So what did you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was kind of neat. I did think the orbital, or not, it wasn't even really an orbital thing, was
No,
it?
it was more like a helicopter strike or something.
Yeah, I don't know. It was hard to tell what he was actually doing. But when you paint it with the laser, I felt like that was a little bit excessive. Like in terms of they make you do it like 3 times in a row or something on
Yeah.
the on that final boss, and it seemed like it was just like over. And, oh no, even leading up to it, before when you have to like knock
Just like a
the ceremony
growth.
site down or whatever, and yeah, it's like just over and over and over, and they give you plenty of ammo to do it, but it's like it's weird how they felt like it's like they almost felt like they couldn't come up with anything else, and so they had to stretch it out a little bit more almost, or just follow the rule of three, and game bosses.
And also at that point, there were a few moments where I felt like I don't know what the game wants me to do, and it can feel like, okay, I shouldn't be shooting this thing because it's not accepting ammo, it's not registering it. Oh, it wants me to do that laser strike. When I had to do the third laser strike on the structure, there were so many enemies that were really fast and powerful that if the game played by the rules, me taking the time to stop and just paint a laser on this thing, I would have been killed. But for some reason, the enemies played along. They're like, "Oh, he's doing the laser thing. Everybody, chill and back off." So there were several instances in the game where it was like that, where they broke their own rules to try to do something cool. And so the tank Let's have this hilarious
Oh
tank.
God,
They
that
really
was
wanted to have a
amazing.
tank, and then they go, oh shit, but we also gave the guy magneto powers. So why would he build this? Because it's the one thing he can't control, I guess. So he'll make it. He just like gradually has a pile of all the metal that he can't control, and he decides to make a tank out of it just for fun, and it's just sitting around. And then you get in it and you use it. And like, there's so many lines of dialogue where Chris goes, "Hey, turns out I found this toy. So it's got the keys, it's gassed up, it's ready to go. This elevator fits it. Okay." There's just too many times. And then when the story goes, you were actually dead the whole time. It gives you the sixth sense twist. I actually got chills. I was like, oh my God, this makes sense and is so cool. And then the more they talk about it, the more that it's just,
They ruin it.
yeah, it
They
doesn't.
ruin the suspense and the mystery of everything, and yeah, over explanation.
Yeah, and also like over explaining mundane things, but then not like, okay, if Ethan's dead, why is he dying now? Because he had his
Right.
heart ripped out, and he's
It's
out.
because it's convenient for the story.
There's way too much of that sort of like hand waving, convenient. Just fit it in. We have the idea, and how we're gonna make that fit, we don't know. And it turns out the people that like these games don't really care. They're more into the spectacle of it,
Right.
which I get, but I mean, a lot of arguments are like, well, how can you like Star Wars? I mean, it doesn't make sense that people. Well, yeah, but they explain that and then they play within their rules. Or even like, I'm a fan of pro wrestling, and yeah, it's like fake and it doesn't make sense. But the fans live and die with it be making sense, you know. So like, if somebody hurts their arm, that's the storyline of the match is that they can't use the arm, and then they incorporate that. And then if they forget, it breaks the immersion. So I'm pretty hard on Resident Evil Village. I thought it was okay. But man, I don't get all the love for it. So
What was your favorite moment from it?
um, I think I liked when they said that Ethan was dead, and the baby moment was pretty cool too.
Hmm.
The baby moment I was genuinely surprised by because they do a pretty good job of, and I like that part of just kind of messing around. I felt like I was playing LA Noire, the way you're like investigating that doll and pulling things out and actually taking the items and looking at them. Because so many of the puzzles in the game felt like it's just a.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's not a puzzle. You don't actually have
Compared
to
to the
think.
rest.
Yeah. So yeah, probably that whole section in the workshop, which has the least amount of guns, which is the biggest kind of throwback, the least
I mean, there's
immersion
no
breaking.
fighting. You literally don't have to. You don't have to do anything. Well, except, yeah, no, you don't have your guns at all. So you basically don't do any real like
No,
normal game combat
you just
at all.
run, which is nice, and that's what makes it tense because you're in a tight area, and there's an enemy chasing you, and you're looping around and trying to distract it. But
I
man,
wonder if that's the case for a lot of people, where they're gonna really love one section, one Lord section from the game
yeah,
more than the rest of them.
and that's kind of a danger is if you try to please everybody with something, do you just leave everybody kind of lukewarm? You know,
Yeah,
it's
because
a,
you still got to do it all,
yeah,
and the rest is gonna feel like a chore for some, I'm sure.
yeah. It's kind of like my time with Returnal has been love, love, love this game, and now third biome,
Hmm.
huge difficulty spike, and I just don't want to keep playing, and it exhausts me, and I really want to. And the third biome is so much more difficult. Now I asked you if you'd played any games lately, and you said you were taking a
Oh, we're
break.
done with spoilers, by the way.
We're done with spoilers. Awesome. Bing. All right. Thank you for the reminder, Horky. So you had mentioned you're taking a bit of a break with games. Do you have anything in mind? Because I go on and off games for sure, and I don't think that it's healthy to like force yourself to play them.
Hmm.
And
No, I had played. I had purchased the Yakuza trilogy, the trilogy of what, 3, 4, and 5.
yeah, the remastered on
The
PS4 and PC.
remastered pack. Yeah, I got that on PC, and I was waiting, and I waited for a little while for the bugs to be ironed out because there were a lot of issues with the ports. And yeah, I blasted through 3, but then by the time I got to 4, it felt like a lot more of a drag, after a while. And I found that to be the case with a lot of those games in the Yakuza franchise, because they're all out right now, and they all take place in mostly the same places. There's a lot
Yeah,
of the same stuff going on, and so it can feel it can feel a little bit tedious at times. And oh, and also just like there's a lot of the little extra content, the side objectives you can do, these sub stories, where I feel kind of compelled to do them because like I see them on the map and it's like, oh well, I need to complete that. But then at the same time, sometimes they're just like not quite rewarding enough, and it ends up kind of burning me out through the game. So I kind of just take a pause on four for a little while, and hope I can bring myself back up to playing it a little bit more later.
Well, I think that ties in perfectly to what we're talking about with Resident Evil Village, is that if they would have cut the fat, then I think it would have been more enjoyable and not feeling like a slog to get through. Same thing with Returnal. If I didn't have to run through the first biome every single time to get to the next section, then I would really enjoy that third section, even if it was incredibly difficult. But it's just so frustrating to have to run through all the time. It's like the worst part of Bloodborne was the section of the game where you have to get all the blood vials if you want to attempt the boss again. So yeah, the Yakuza games can be big, and it can be really hit or miss. And what can happen is that sometimes you might dread like another encounter because you think, this could be kind of a waste of time. Or then you might even miss something that was really good that you just had no idea. I had no idea that talking to this guy at a sushi shop and like following that whole quest line through would be, strangely like introspective and have a lot to say. But yeah, the Yakuza games, they're a bit of a beast. They're huge, and I guess they're sort of like a Grand Theft Auto. They're sort of like they're trying to be an everything game. I mean, you can actually play Virtual Fighter in them. There's so many mini games with it. And that is going to come at a risk of making the combat's going to be... I thought that the combat in Yakuza 0 was awesome, and ever since then it's taken it's felt way more shallow. I love the combat in 0, the way you had to like quickly shuffle between your different play styles, the different like fighting forms, and you really had to do that. And since then, it's just been totally downhill. I can see why they switched to turn-based.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, worry no more. They're not doing action Yakuza games going forward whatsoever. It's basically turn-based from here on out. The only ones they're actually doing action for are, I believe, Judgment.
Okay. Now, I could see... I haven't played the turn-based stuff. I would like that for more strategy, and for making it look cooler. Because if it's all kind of canned animations, it could be
that's
more...
true.
Because like the Yakuza games, they kind of look like martial arts duels, but in the end, you end up doing a whole lot of running around, which actually looks really stupid and does not look like a martial arts fight at all, because you have to just run. That's your dodge. It should have been way more about like in tight like counters and blocks and stuff. That's what I would really want to see. Like they really should have just looked at a martial arts movie and been, what are the most effective scenes in fight choreography? How do we make that happen? So if turn-based can make that look more interesting, where I would be worried is that it's going to be more of a grind in a game that can already be grindy.
I've heard things that there is a little bit of a grind in 7. So
that's worrisome. So, but I'd like to give it a chance because I can like turn-based combat a lot, especially I find it makes bosses usually more fun, and it makes the in-between fights can be kind of annoying.
I hear good things about it though. So I mean, I think it's you'd be in for a treat to play it.
Yeah, I think there's so much. I'm having so much good stuff to play now, but I'm going to keep it on the radar, and I'll probably pick it up when it hits sale. I'd still like to get back to Xenogears, Final Fantasy 9. I just picked up the original Spider-Man. Biomutant's coming out. Oh, this happened to me at EB Games today. So I spent extra on a PS5 with a disc, because if you buy a game at EB Games and you trade it in within 1 month of the release date, you get $50 back, which is pretty great when a game costs like 80 or 90 bucks, or sometimes 100 with the PS5 ones. If I can get half that back, if I do that every time I would normally buy a game, and the cycle of it, because I have usually no interest in playing a game again for a couple of years, that would work really well. I'd like pay off the PlayStation basically and what I would already buy. We had a pandemic lockdown, and this is after I bought Outriders, which I only bought thinking, whatever, it's only going to cost me like $40 in the end. I kept calling EB Games. Okay, our country's lockdown for the pandemic means you can't be open and you can't do the trade-ins. Are you going to honor this $50 trade-in? No problem. Like multiple guys at EB Games said this to me. No girls. Guys made this mistake. So today is the day. Businesses are open. I called them just to make sure, and I said, hey, I'm bringing in Outriders. They said you would honor this $50. The guy says, who told you that? Why would we can't do that. It's way after a month of the release. He's like, I'll take your number and I'll call my district manager and I'll call you back. I gave him my number. He never called me back. I went to my trusty local EB Games, which is like 25 minutes away. I told the guy my story, and he goes, oh, okay. He goes, I can't give you $50 trade-in, so what I will do is give you a satisfaction guaranteed refund of the full price of the game. So the game, Returnal, came out in like early April, and it's now May 17th. He gave me the full like $100 back with tax and everything. He says, if you put it into another game. It's like, yeah, man. Biomutant pre-orders paid for. And that's actually a cheaper game. And what else did I put it in? I'm like, Ratchet and Clank, put it on my tab. Because I was just so happy that he did it. And then I also brought some other games. I brought Mario 3D World Bowser's Fury, Civilization 6, both on the Switch, obviously, and Miles Morales. And I brought them, if they were going to give me an okay trade-in value, I would do it. If not, I'd be like, fuck you, I could sell this privately. Nintendo games are worth so much. But because he went out of his way to do that for me, it's like, even if you don't give me the best amount. So I traded those in. I got all those games paid for. The two that I mentioned. Picked up Spider-Man for $36. So in the end, I paid like $10. Got them all figured out. So nice. So I was pretty happy about that. And I like buying games physical because I don't play them again. Multiplayer games and stuff, I like to have digital so you can just quickly fire it up. But I guess you're mostly playing PC stuff, so you're always buying digital. But it seems like you can get them cheaper on Steam.
It's still mostly full price, though, in most cases. Like, full price relative to, like, the old full price, which is 60, right? 60 USD. Whereas now a lot of the, like PS5 games are 70. And, I think that was the case for Biomutant. I think it's a 60 USD game.
I think it's a little cheaper. I'll verify that now, but I think it was some cheap price. Biomutant USD price. Let's see here. Oh shit, $60.
Yeah.
Why?
It's a full price game.
In Canada, Biomutant Canada price $60. Weird.
Yeah, that's why I was kind of like leery a little bit into waiting to see how that game turns out. So it's somewhat less well-tested developer as far as I know. I actually don't really know the story behind that team.
Dude, that's $20 less than a full-price game here. Our games are 80 normally and then 90 now that they're PS5. And Biomutant is 60 Canadian and 60 US. Wow, so the Americans are getting ripped off. We
get a little taste of what the Australians feel now.
Yeah, whatever games don't get banned and canceled by their awesome censoring companies they've got down there. Their censoring organizations, I should say. The Sean Layden, the head of the guy who was shepherding Sony PlayStation for the last 10, 15 years. He left Sony. Jim Ryan took over, and Sean Layden said in 2020. I believe, after the pandemic had started, he said that he didn't see AAA gaming as sustainable. He said that when you look at the price of gaming, to create a game in like the PS4 generation as compared to the PS3, it's like doubled in price. So you're going from, say, like 80 million to 160 million, or from like 40 million to 80 million. So when people are saying like, oh my God, I can't believe I got to pay another $10 for a game, prices have been the same since games cost like 10 times less. They could be charging a lot more, but I think it's a little worrisome when a guy who is that clued in on the industry is saying this is unsustainable, and it's only sustainable because people want to make games so they can work people to the bone. That's
what I was gonna say. It's like it's sustainable when you can like essentially sort of run the workers like slaves. Yeah, when you can exploit the heck out of them.
Yeah, and I would like to see. I would just like to see games dialed back down. Like when EA made Star Wars Squadrons, I thought it was really great how So I really liked what EA Squadrons did. EA Squadrons. EA's
EA
Star Wars Squadrons, owned by Disney. And it was so great. It was this budget title, less than full price. Didn't have a lot of crazy cutscenes. You couldn't walk freely. There was no open world. There was no crafting. There were still good cutscenes, awesome gameplay. The graphics were surprisingly good. Voice acting. There was killer gameplay, good story, good production. And EA was apologizing when they would talk about it. They're like, "We're sorry. We're not going to have any DLC after." Yeah, fucking good. Stop charging me more to like finish the story. And they're like, "Oh, it's a small scale game." It was absolutely perfect. And if that is a sustainable way to go forward, please keep doing that. For a company like Naughty Dog to go away and spend, how long did it take them to make The Last of Us Part 2? Like between 5 and 7 years? That's crazy.
So what was that, 2013 or something for Last of Us Part 1?
Or like how long it takes to make The Witcher, to make Cyberpunk, and you're just burning people out. And it's sort of like, okay, if you want to be a musician, everybody wants to be a musician, so you got to work shitty hours. And we're going to burn you out. You want to be a pop star? You want to work in the games industry? There's so many people that want to do it. You don't like it. Fuck you. So I think it's going to keep going because there's no shortage in people that want to get into it. But, man, I'm starting to see things lately like more people in the sports media that I follow are just all of a sudden quitting. They go, well, it's been a good 6 or 7 years. I dedicated my whole life to this, on to the next. And you think, man, people are getting grinded out and they just can't do it anymore. So I hope that this just pulls us back and makes more focused experiences. But I'm worried that there's going to be some serious consequences.
Yeah, when I was going to say also, just adding into that, I heard something about there was something about the games industry, the market shrinking a little bit over this next year. I don't know if that has to do with like returning to like semi-normal life, not being able to dedicate as much time to stuff. But anyway, that still represents something, a kind of interesting trend that could play into that.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody had predicted that the gaming revenue would shrink in 2021. I think that's in 2020, unprecedented pandemic. People are home. You've got more time to play games. You also want to escape. Also, these games were all worked on way before and are out now. So now I'm thinking there were probably a ton of games where people went, shit, let's push them back to 2021. And there's probably a lot of games that are like, we were trying to finish them, like Cyberpunk, and it's a huge challenge because now you're working from home. So I think that I really thought there'd be kind of like a backlog and then a deluge of all the stuff coming up, but it seems like that got worked out where they just made their money in 2020, and there's probably going to be more 2022 stuff.
Yeah, because you've got Halo Infinite and Deathloop supposed to be coming out this year.
Yep, late 2021.
Those are pretty major titles. Yeah, you've got some pretty big players coming out this year with some stuff.
Yeah, Deathloop I'm pretty into. I think Deathloop has some mainstream appeal, even though it's a new IP, because of the art style of it, and it's kind of like stylish.
Art Deco.
Yeah, Art Deco. People love Art Deco. It's kind of got like if Tarantino made a video game in a way. But I mean, it's not another Dishonored. It's not another Deus Ex. It's not a Prey. So, and it doesn't look nerdy. You know what I mean? It doesn't kind of have that like, that sort of nerd culture. Maybe more like comic booky in a way, but not like a serious comic book. So I'll be interested to see how it sells. It seems like games have been selling like crazy since the PS5 and Xbox Series X have come out. I always have to close my eyes and try to remember what they call their things. But I think that's more because there's just sort of a demand, and big games have been kind of few and far between. We're getting a lot of PS4 games though that are like, the games coming out are still continue to be put out on the PS4. Like
it's like, speaking of like Biomutant, I mean, that's like a fairly, I mean, I guess I hadn't followed that for the longest time, but it seems like there were people who were really into it. They heard about it from like years ago or something.
Yeah.
And so for me, it just sort of slipped under the radar and popped up in the past like 2 months or so. And I looked at it and was like, wow, this looks amazing. I mean, it looks very blatantly Breath of the Wild-esque, but seeing something like that looks like it looks pretty close to being like AAA maybe.
Yeah.
Coming from a developer that's seems pretty new. That's pretty interesting. I mean, it'll be really interesting to see if this is a representation of what indie studios are capable of doing in coming years. Because if that's like, if they can essentially put out games that look close to being AAA
Hmm.
in terms of visual fidelity and detail, uh, that'll be great. I'd love that. Although, you know, I don't want to see more burnout either if it takes a lot of effort.
Well, yeah, I mean, The Witcher's team is can pull off like CD Projekt Red can pull off so much because they know that Poland there's a the like your general quality of life is going to be less. Your average wage in Poland is going to be a lot less. So
Mm-hmm.
and there's not this opportunity to work on something big and popular, and it's kind of like your chance to be a rock star over there. So you can get away with that. And again, that's exploitation. Like we can have it's like the clothes you wear, the electronics you buy. It's at an affordable price because we're exploiting somebody, and it's and I mean that's just like capitalism with it. So I mean with Star Wars Squadrons, the gameplay was so tight, and they just cut corners on the stuff you didn't need. I mean, I'm watching some Biomutant footage right now. It's behind us in this video. It looks like a big giant open world. So they're not really cutting corners there. I think this game really speaks to
It's
gamers.
hard to tell though. It's hard to tell how big that world is
That's true.
because there's a lot of foliage and like it's you see these wide vistas, but can you go there? I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, like Ghost of Tsushima kind of did that too, where they sort of like walled you in a bit, where it was sort of open, but more like just pathways. I feel like they're afraid to make things not open, which
Hmm.
I think they should get away from. But yeah, this game is they are really speaking to gamers, and like this is a game and it's just going to be kind of fun. There's a lot of like comic book words that pop out. I would be so I'm going to start a list of like questions I would ask game developers, and I'd say, what makes the game expensive? Is it cutscenes? Is it like face scanning? Is it like with Star Wars Squadrons? I think that's probably the best. I keep going back to that because EA makes gigantic games, and that
Yeah,
to
it's
me,
shocking
yeah,
what they did.
it's like they're making Battlefield, and they're making some of the biggest games in the world, or like talking to Ubisoft, and it seems like okay, well they're able to put out a lot of games because they reuse a lot of stuff. So it must be the
Mm.
creation of this. Is it cheaper to make a game and then extend it to 40 hours as opposed to making 4 10-hour games? I would think so. But I don't know. Like, is me just saying, okay, well, I'd rather have a great game that's 12 hours long? Is that just unfeasible because it would cost way more than to make about
Mm.
12 hours of content and kind of like pad
The
it out?
initial investment. You're basically asking is the initial investment. Um, how much does that give you?
Hmm.
How much do you need for that to pay off?
Yeah. So that's something I'd love to know. And but like you said, there's going to be a bit of mystery behind how good and how big is Biomutant. I also hadn't watched much of this at all. I was a little disappointed when I saw that it was only going to be on the PS4 that I'd be playing, but this version that it's
Hmm.
on, that I'm looking at right now,
I
this is
didn't
on
realize.
THQ Nordic site. This gameplay footage, released May 14th, published, says it's running on PC at 4K 60. So if the PS4 Pro version is probably going to be something like 1080 60, I would imagine. And then they'll probably later patch that to run on the PS5. But I think that this team is smart. They're not like Cyberpunk 2077 that they go, let's release on everything from Stadia to the highest end PC, PS5, PS4. And yeah, no wonder they ran into troubles trying to make this happen. I think that Nordic went 4K 60 on PC. We'll make a PS4 Pro version, PS4, PS5 guys, and girls. You can just play it. You're probably not. I'm doubting I'm going to get 4K, which is kind of a bummer. But as long as it's 60 for a game like this with this much motion.
Yeah, that is interesting that it's a I get so worried when I see these games that are developed kind of targeting PS4 because of whatever like the long dev cycle they've had extending well back into the PS4's lifetime.
Hmm.
That does that does always make me worry a little bit, like how much cruft is in there that's going to
Cruft.
be yeah,
I've never heard that.
how
I
much
like it.
cruft is hanging around in there that's going to be either a source of bugs or gonna run and like slow down because of some, you know,
Yeah.
because sometimes that like code can be architecturally like hard to um it's hard to like just upend stuff
Hmm.
and completely, rely on a whole new like paradigm that's available with, for example, PS5 as opposed to PS4. PC, it's a little more straightforward, I guess, because you actually can just, well, they're just used to building in like targeting certain levels of graphical capabilities
Yeah.
and different processors that are going to be scattered in different PCs. So it's more of like a like PC is more of like a spectrum, whereas consoles are very fixed, and so it's very easy to target that kind of stuff.
But it
I don't
seems,
know how dynamic it is for consoles. Like,
yeah.
when is it just turning a switch? But I would think there'd be a lot more programming involved in terms of conforming to newer APIs, newer programming interfaces, um, and newer technologies in general.
I think that we're definitely before it was more so like that. I mean,
Hmm.
going from a PS1 to PS2 or a 2 to a 3, they had totally different
Sure.
physical mediums, DVDs, Blu-rays. And then the PS3 was around for so long that the PS4 was a bigger jump. But now that we've had this PS4 to the Pro and now the Pro to the 5, it's starting to feel like PC gaming, where it's just like they're telling you, you're going to get this resolution and this frame rate on whatever PlayStation you happen to be on, and it's just going to be like PC. All right. What do you think of this? A Sony patent could allow for esports betting on the PlayStation, bringing in gambling. Gambling is huge money. I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons that sports make so much money is that people want to gamble on it. They don't really care what it is, and I mean, so much information is given out by about what athletes are hurt, and it's not because the fans who don't bet care. It's because it's all about betting. So, esports betting on the PlayStation, kind of a slippery slope because kids play video games and you don't want to
Yep.
market any of that to them. But if you're an adult, you got a console, and you want to bet, then like I could see that being well within the right, and actually seems like a progressive thing to move towards. I mean, I guess there could be some negative things. God, you would hate to see what like EA is rubbing their hands together, thinking like, "Oh my God,
I mean,
could
this
you?"
is something that's already gonna. I mean, I can't offer you any specifics, but I'm sure it's being done elsewhere on third-party sites, right?
Right.
And pretty much Sony just wants to take a cut. I am a little surprised, just in the sense that I feel like there's been a lot of resistance against this lately, especially in I was gonna say Europe. I want to say there's more regulations against that now, more of a fight against making it easy to do, to have essentially gambling in games. Most of that has been oriented around loot boxes and not necessarily like betting on players.
Hmm.
But I would think it would be kind of a similar vein.
Yeah, and it's. I just threw up a League of Legends esports thing about showing kind of their perception in the public of people saying it's not a real sport, and Jimmy Kimmel and Whoopi Goldberg putting it down and stuff. Uh, it's. I mean, I have no interest in it. In gem, well, who knows? Actually, it's just a way to enjoy it a bit more. Like, if there was a game like Rocket League, I've watched a bit of Rocket League esports because I am invested in playing it, and I think this game's hard. I want to see what the pros are doing,
Yeah.
and I know that these are the very best people. If I'm playing NHL 21 and thinking this kind of sucks as an NHL game, I want to watch the best people play it, and just to see, because the game changes. I mean, playing a real time, playing StarCraft against the computer on easy and watching the best in the world play it, they're
Oh
completely
yeah.
different games, right? So same with all this stuff. So I could see myself getting into it. I have my little dalliances with gambling here and there, and we just make it more exciting. So it's a slippery slope, but it's one I'm not surprised to see them get into.
Yeah. It's a growing industry, it seems like.
It makes gambling just makes so much money, but it's like you're making money off people's addictions because it's the whales that are
Oh yeah.
that are spending the most money. It's the people that probably shouldn't be gambling.
Yeah, when are we gonna get? Well, I don't know if this. I'm sure it's already happened, but like people allegedly throwing games just so that they can like throw a bet, right?
Well, people have cried out that boxing is
Crazy.
so corrupt, right? And boxing has basically turned into professional wrestling, where you've got people like celebrities fighting aging boxing stars, and you're just kind of building it up, and it's not really about boxing at that point. And realizing that the more of a villain you are, like so many people want to see Jake or Logan Paul, I don't care which one it is, get punched in the fucking face, and he's banking on that. Like, yeah,
You just made me think of
Paul.
like no, like these people six like when these guys are in the actual esports players right now, when it's like they're like 60 or 70 years old or something, and then you get to play against them on like a 40-year-old game or something, right? Like that
Okay.
would be. I was just
Oh,
thinking. I was just
yeah, yeah.
imagining that when you talking about like people like Jake or Logan Paul or whatever fighting against these old boxing legends. It's like the same kind of thing. Imagine these people fighting against gaming legends,
Like
but like
the King of Kong guy, the villain in that, and he's facing off against, yeah, like some 9-year-old YouTuber. And they have to
oh
do, the
man,
first game is like them playing Pac-Man or Donkey Kong, and then the next one is Fortnite.
right?
And
But
they
that's
both
like
have
what
to
it.
learn
Yeah.
each other's thing.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's like what it would be now, right? Like, I mean, for us, it would be like playing against somebody playing like Atari or Pac-Man or something, right? An arcade game or something, whatever. Which is, I guess, that's kind of already sort of a thing. But those games are so much simpler now. I mean, I don't know what games are going to look like in 30 or 40 years. How like what if the complexity will ramp up in the same way that it has since gaming started. But yeah, I just think the situation just is funny in my mind. Like
Well,
imagining these guys like got an oxygen tank off to the side.
it just, and one guy dies from the stress, heart attack. I pwned you, old man.
Yeah, he's sweating.
It's uh it's interesting though, like what will games look like in 30 years? I think we're kind of stuck a little bit on games. It doesn't seem kind of silly that almost every single game is shooting. And I
Yeah,
get like that's okay, well it's we know that you can control with a mouse and the joystick, and it's almost always that, and if it isn't, it can be very easily boring. Like why is ever like story like BioShock is an interesting story, and then trying to deal with all these like heavy things of philosophy and what is life, but it really amounts to you shooting thousands of people. Even Uncharted.
I think it's. I think there's a. Well, I don't know. Maybe this is just a hypothesis for me, but like I would suppose it's just because all of the action gets to happen at a distance,
Mm,
and so you don't have to deal with like. I mean, you've played games where you have like melee or whatever going on, right?
yeah,
Sometimes that can be very awkward, just
yeah.
mechanically. It can be immersion breaking, like if you have to actually interact with like objects up real close to you. Hey, maybe VR will fix that. Maybe we'll get something a way better portable, even more portable solution that will allow us to open up VR into like a bigger market. But I just think that like when you have a game where you're just shooting at stuff, all the stuff happens at a distance. It doesn't come up as much right up on the screen. So I don't know, just an idea. But
That's a really good point. I didn't think of that. Is that yeah? Because you don't need the textures to be as detailed if they're smaller characters and they're farther away. And when you do think about people being up close, yeah, you can see the flaws in it. And also there is that sense of like, are we nailing the weight of the movement? And because
mhm.
movement is always what gives it away. Like I was watching some Love, Death, and Robots, and sometimes the CGI is so good, I can't tell if that's real or not. And then as soon as you start moving, there's just something that instantly gives it away. And
And the
then
screen flattens it out too. Like just overall, like the screen, because we don't have perspective unless we have like, two screens, two lenses like in VR,
mhm.
you don't get that perspective of being able to see what's up close and what's far away. It's
Yeah,
just
it's just
completely
bigger or
gone.
smaller.
Everything's just flattened out onto a screen.
That's true. I would think with VR you would get a bit more depth, but you would also, I mean, the resolution is going to drop until the technology improves, and then also it could be more of an uncanny valley thing. It's going to be yeah, it's something they're always battling. But I'm all for seeing games try to do something a little different. I get it. It just felt like the 2D era was all platformers, and
Hmm.
now everything. For a while everything was first person shooters. Now like everything is a third person shooter. So I don't know. Maybe I'm waiting for second person shooting. I don't know. All right. Okay, here's something fun. The next Donkey Kong being developed by the Super Mario Odyssey team. I think that Donkey Kong Country and Super Nintendo, those games were fantastic. The Donkey Kong games on the Wii and the Wii U I thought were really, really good. I've never really played a 3D Donkey Kong game that I
No
like.
DK64.
Yeah, it always seemed like Donkey Kong struggled with that because it's more about sort of like speed and the momentum, even more so
Hmm.
than Mario, where Mario was sometimes a bit more slower paced.
But not quite Sonic. It's
No,
like somewhere straddling that boundary.
oh, it's definitely did Sonic a lot better than Sonic ever did itself. And okay, so the Mario Odyssey team, like, okay, so this person here, Lonely Goomba, tweeting out, I heard an unlucky rumor Mario Odyssey team are working on a 3D Donkey Kong game. I think I would actually prefer that to another 3D Mario. I wouldn't. I like to see Donkey Kong stay 2D. I would like to see
I don't know.
another 2D Donkey Kong game, especially because right now they basically ported over the Wii U version. They're selling it at full price on the Switch. Such bullshit. So
It
yeah, I would.
felt like I don't know. Donkey Kong seemed like it had kind of a I don't know, maybe this is just me, but it's like, did it feel like it was just not as big as
Mhm.
like Donkey Kong Country on the SNES, pretty big, like on par with Mario. But I feel like Donkey Kong wasn't really so much on par with Mario when it comes to like Switch or Wii titles. I mean, they're competing against what Galaxy, right? Um, but I
Also,
don't know. I just it kind of I feel like it lost a little bit of something. Even if it was a great game, something about it in my mind, like the way I'm remembering it, just
mhm.
felt like it was sort of in the background.
Well, I mean, some of these games are kind of surprising with what they sell. Like Mario Galaxy sold way less than the new Super Mario Brothers games. It's incredible how much more they sell, and some of them are packing games too, so that can be kind of skewed. Metroid is not a big seller, but is in people's minds a lot, and Donkey Kong I think sells more. There's a lot of mainstream people that grew up with Donkey Kong Country and the Super Nintendo. The graphics were really impressive, but it was still really tight gameplay wise. I also think there's just not really a lot you can. There's not as much you can do. You know, Mario's built in that he has many different powers and abilities. And that works. They did such a good job with Mario 64. I don't think they ever really found a way to make Donkey Kong great in 3D.
Mm.
It's Banjo Kazooie tended to work. I mean, but it's
I think they
been.
could do it. It's just like I don't know. This is where I want that team to impress me.
Mhm.
You know, that's where the optimistic side of me says yes. Do it. Make it awesome. And it's got to have the music. It's got to have the fantastic music.
Mhm. Well, we shall see. I mean, it was Rare that made all their best Donkey Kong games too, as well. So I don't know. It's Nintendo, so they're gonna work on it until it's polished as hell before they put it out. So we shall see. How about this? A Sony patent could adjust gaming latency to match your ability, slowing down the game until you improve. I think to me that seems like I'm very conservative when it comes to that. I think that everybody should have the same game experience. Once you start tailoring stuff, I feel like there could be issues where, oh my god, like it's one thing to slow the game down, but don't mess with the inputs on it. So maybe by latency they don't mean what I'm thinking of the latency in a traditional sense of like when you press a button when it happens. Maybe they just mean we're going to slow the game down slightly, maybe enough that you wouldn't really notice, but you do. They do stuff like this all the time where if you have a health bar and you get shot and the first shot takes off 10% of your health, the last couple shots will not take off 10%. They'll take off like
Hmm.
5%, 3%. If you are running across a pit and you press the jump button a bit too late, they will make up for that. So, and they do that because there is a built in latency of your screen, of your controller, and game developers are always trying to make it so that okay, if the player's trying to do this, let's give them an assistance. But I don't know. What do you think of this? To me, I'm kind of an old man conservative, and I'm like, oh, don't start messing around with it fluidly. But maybe they're kind of already doing that anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. It is tricky. Like if it's like a fixed thing, like you're talking about, where it's like pretty um predictable, where it's like okay, yeah, 5% or 10%, then 5%, then 3%. If it's like something that's fairly deterministic like that, that kind of makes sense. It makes sense for like an easier mode,
Hmm.
and if you could pick that mode, like a more permissible mode or something, whatever you want to call it. But if you start doing it dynamically in this like really, you know, ambiguous way, like if I don't know what's happening, it's going to be harder to have well, I would think it would be harder to have a common discourse on the game
Mm-hmm.
because like how can your experience really match up with somebody else's? Doesn't matter, I guess, is first of all, would be one thing to ask. But I would think it would probably affect that.
Well, okay, so Sony has been developing a system that would help adjust the game's difficulty. I think eyeing new gamers, because that is a big thing. Like, if you're trying to make a game that there's a pretty
Yeah.
big difference between somebody who's new to a game and somebody who's been playing games for like years. A proposed self-adjusting latency system, the gameplay would actually be slowed down in order to compensate for a player's abilities and reflexes. As the player gets better, the latency would then be reduced, bringing the players to a full-speed gameplay experience. So
It just sounds like they're like actually slowing down the frame rate almost when things, or maybe for animations, like as like a, maybe they keep the rest of the environment going at full frame rate, but the animations of like an attack are much, or like maybe slower than normal or something. An enemy attack, so that
Mhm.
you have time to kind of see it coming or something. Um,
which I think works pretty well. It could screw up timing if it was a game that was based on like parries and stuff.
yeah, yeah.
You're really messing with
I don't know.
people's like muscle memory with that kind of stuff.
It might trap you in that way. You might end up being sort of trapped into that difficulty
Hmm.
and not get better if it assuming it's if it doesn't work as advertised, I guess. I don't know. Seems very experimental. Like I don't know if they've been testing this on actual people, to see how they fare. Um, I don't know.
Well, they're thinking. I mean, what about okay? The implications for the future of esports and speedrun records. I
Hmm.
mean, you would have to.
They'd have to have a fixed mode where it's like it just turned that off.
Yeah, well, you'd be a lot more worried about people cheating with that kind of stuff. But it's interesting. I think if you can do something that might lower the barrier of entry in a better way for people that are new to games and just I like that. I think they should just probably do that more with easy modes because it seems like you kind of have at least I mean, I haven't played many games on an easy mode, but with hard modes, I look at it and I go, if all you're doing is making the enemies sponges, I'm
Yeah,
not.
that
I'm not
sucks.
playing that. That's stupid. Like, make them more aggressive. Sure, I'd like if it's a shooter, like every game, make the enemies kind of surround you more, have
Hmm.
better tactics, as opposed to like, oh, you just have to hit them 10 more times. That's not really. That's
Like in
not.
Resident Evil Village, like how you're talking about, they would the enemies would give you time to paint the laser, right?
Yeah.
Well, what if you had it so that they were a little more aggressive or something?
Hmm.
That makes them. It's not well. I have a feeling even that could get a little bit tedious. I think it's a fine line, whatever you end up doing.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm definitely with you on avoiding and big sponges for hard mode. That's
It's
just an
just the
endurance
laziest way
test.
to do it, and yeah, and it just kind of for some games that works. Dark Souls bosses have a gigantic life bar because you need to prove that you can not just sort of force your way through and you can't use any
Hmm.
tricks or anything. So you actually have to demonstrate what you're doing. I guess roguelikes do the same thing. You got to prove that you can go through this thing without getting hit enough before you die all the way through. So it's interesting though, and it's nice to see that they're constantly looking at these different things because like they know hardcore gamers are always going to be there.
Hmm.
So it does come down to like how do you bring in new people that if you've never used a dual stick system, that's pretty unwielding. Like you hand a controller to somebody, and it's not second nature to them. And I mean, for especially for most people, like even coming to that for the first time, or like PC gamers, it's a totally different world going from a mouse and keyboard to using that, using your thumbs and these sticks. So anything they can to bring in more mainstream people without sacrificing the quality that hardcore gamers want, I'm all for them, and I think it's pretty fascinating going forward. Now, what do you think? This isn't really confirmed, but I think anybody can see that Microsoft spent several $billion on Bethesda. So we can assume that Starfield and whatever the new Elder Scrolls is going to be is not going to be on the PlayStation. Does this mean anything to you? I mean, you're usually PC, and you have a PlayStation. You're pretty against exclusives in gaming at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising. Like I've seen a lot of people tout the whole like, oh, they spent all that money, they got to get something from it, and it's like, yeah, I mean, obviously, but it does kind of suck to see that happen. You know,
Yeah,
I don't want to see more exclusivity. I'd rather see less. Um, but it's not a surprising thing to see in this case either.
yeah. I
And
feel. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know if there's really much more I have on that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, they they're in this competition to have some exclusives. Microsoft has had the smaller pool of high profile exclusives compared to PlayStation. They also dilute the exclusives they do have by always putting them on PC, and then they also give them away on Games Pass. So, and then when you spend like $7 billion more than Star Wars on Bethesda, you obviously are going to get something for it. So it's no surprise that those games would not be on PlayStation. I mean, Sony's kind of fought back and went out there and spent some money on timed exclusives. Like they do it slightly differently. Microsoft is just buying the studio, which can seem like a great idea in the beginning, and then it quickly turns into a bunch of crap. Like Microsoft owns Rare, awesome, and then you never play a great Rare game after that. Or EA, just buying all these studios, and then the studios just kind of crumble into nothing. And Valve buys Campo Santo, and the spiritual successor to Firewatch, a game I was really excited for, just kind of gets shelved while they bring them to work on their games. Whereas Sony tends to just throw a smaller amount of money, and they say, we want to have console exclusivity on Final Fantasy 16 or Final Fantasy 7 Remake, different Square Enix games. Big money, because Square Enix is a huge company. But I think that strategy seems to work. You get a lot more bang for your buck because you're not as responsible. You just, the one game, you put the money out. People, I mean, the majority of game sales are done the first couple of weeks that the game's out. So that's really what matters. But it's going to be kind of a bummer because Skyrim was awesome. I've never beaten it, but I always have fun with it. So I'd be interested to see what they would do next.
It is kind of interesting just thinking like, I mean, Microsoft owns Windows. They can ensure that a game can go on Steam or whatever, and they can just choose to not put it on PlayStation. But PlayStation always has the freedom to put it on Windows.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's nobody to tell them no, whereas Sony can always tell Microsoft no, for a particular studio. So it is a very it's kind of a one-sided thing for them right now. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to see how they fight, how they with the pressures of how they fight against each other with that with the different offerings.
I mean, PC gamers are the ones who usually end up winning because they've kind of just decided that if it's on PC, that's okay. And I think there's just so many people who play on PC only that they don't want to give that up. And I'm really glad to see that too. That PlayStation is kind of extending the games out there and putting more of them out there. Games that we would have never seen on PC before are making their way over. And so I think Sony's been dipping their toes and realizing we can squeeze all that money, that first bit, keep it on PlayStation for a few months, 6 months, a year, put it in the PC, get this whole other hype behind it.
Yeah, I'm still thinking back to like last week's thing with the whole Valve or Steam, possibly on Steam games on console or whatever it is, because that'll really shift things too, depending on how things go, if things go any particular way there with that.
Man, I could not see them doing that because they love they love their store. Although definitely not Sony. Sony loves their cut. Sony doesn't, like we were talking about last time. Epic tried so hard to get Sony to do crossplay, and Sony says this doesn't work for us. We don't need to do that because we don't want people buying your cosmetics and then playing the game on our spot. We want more money. And Microsoft has got nothing to lose. Nintendo doesn't seem to care. They're like, we don't want to set up. Nintendo's just this old man that's like, what? People buy cosmetics? Oh my word! And they're behind Sony there. So I don't know. I look at it as like Sony definitely is not in the position to try to just do things to build consumer interest. Like, for example, my story about EB Games. They lost a bit more money giving me a refund on a game that I had for over a month, but I will spend more money long term because of that goodwill. Microsoft does the same thing. They lose money giving you basically free remasters. You can play the best version of Morrowind is the original Xbox One played on an Xbox Series X or whatever, other than PC mods. And that's Microsoft. PlayStation would never do that. Never. You have to pay. You have to buy PS2 games on the PS4, and they are the laziest fucking remasters you've ever seen. They're laziest ports. So, like, there's zero added to it. It's just the privilege to play this whole game.
Meanwhile, you can pay like whatever it costs for Xbox Live and get or Xbox Games Pass and get just new releases for some trivial amount of money.
Oh my God! For a small little subscription, boom! Outriders free, MLB The Show, fucking free, Halo
Infinite's gonna be a big one for a lot of people this year, I think.
Oh my God! Outer Worlds, that was free. Scalebound and Crackdown didn't come out, but or did they? I can't remember. Sometimes it's just good having a big title, and even if it never comes out, it's just kind of like just gets people interested. I think kind of builds a bit of goodwill. But all right, what's the next game you're interested in playing? Are you still has Yakuza 4 broken you from being excited about games?
I mean, I want to do. Actually, no. You know what? One of the ones I actually wanted to do is that new Mario Golf.
Yeah. Okay.
That one's like, I kind of remember playing some of the older iterations of that game, and I know it's just golf, but they really look like they did some interesting like mechanics for this new one. I want something that feels like putt, but like, it kind of has that like fun aspect of doing like mini golf.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think golf is excellent for video games because it's all physics. You can use timing and physics, and there's wind, and there's like variable. Like it's a program. To me, I don't know a lot about programming and coding, but I would assume like it's a coder's dream because everything is a variable, right? You can we can calculate for wind, the slope, the different terrain, the different clubs and stuff, and it works so well. It's also something you can play multiplayer with one controller. And then Nintendo is actually trying to do something really interesting, like having a speed version, just kind of making it chaotic, which is pretty cool. I like that there's going to be more of a realistic version of it, and then kind of a crazy Nintendo version. There's going to be that Nintendo polish. I love golf games. I was disappointed with everybody's golf because the multiplayer sucked because it wasn't synchronized. Nintendo's will not be like that. I'm sure that it'll be... Oh my God, what if it doesn't have online? Oh my God.
They've got to have online.
I know, but...
They have to.
Yeah, I mean, Splatoon's online is kick-ass, and I play it wirelessly, and it's awesome. So, I think this will be good. I'm pumped on this. All right, and of course, there's going to be motion controls. If you want to. I would give it a try.
They kind of, they really should... Do you think they're going to have... Because they're kind of doing away with the cardboard stuff, right?
Oh,
I'm just thinking you build like a little cardboard golf club.
Yeah.
That could be really bad if you put the controller at like the end of it, fling it out.
Oh yeah, because they'd have to put it at the top. But yeah, like adding that length. Talk about physics and variables.
It's your nice little Nintendo Switch shot put.
My buddy has a kid who's like 7 or 8 years old. They still play Wii, and they play Wayne. I don't know if this is popular in the States, but there was a hockey game called Wayne Gretzky's Hockey. And the kids fucking love it, playing with that Wiimote. Pretty amazing. Yeah, I'm pumped on this game. Man, I'm such a Nintendo fanboy, but I don't think I'm a fanboy in the way that I will forgive bad shit. Like, I still give them shit. I think that they gouge people when they re-release Wii U games on the Switch for full price, and all they add is like a difficulty mode or the DLC or... a battle mode. So now they're showing this speed golf version where you're taking a shot and you're just running, which is kind of cool. It's kind of like speed chess, because you're not having the time to, and there's like power-ups. It's going to be kind of like Mario Kart. This is, I love that half of this game is golf exactly as it was on the NES, like in the 80s. And the rest of it is just totally wild, batshit crazy, we're gonna break all the rules. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm pumped. I think that is coming out in June. Mario Golf, and then Biomutant coming out soon. Ratchet and Clank. I messed around with the Ratchet and Clank on PS4, that kind of like remake reboot or whatever. Yeah, I thought it was okay, but I'm excited. I'm actually kind of into playing.
The thing is,
Anyway.
I feel like that Biomutant almost gives me a little bit of a Ratchet and Clank vibe, just a little bit. Like, I mean, I don't know how I'm gonna like the RPG elements to that. Like, there is going to be looting stuff. Like, you're going to be picking up stuff and comparing numbers. And
In which one, Biomutant or Ratchet and Clank?
in Biomutant, like, you are looting weapons and stuff, right? Or at least that's what I've seen in gameplay shots. And I'm not super into that as much as I used to be, because at this point it just feels like a little bit like tedium.
Yeah.
It's that's not an interesting choice to have to make when you're playing a game. So that part is going to be, I'm not really looking forward to that. And basically that's really what I'm kind of wanting to find out. How much of the game is going to be that kind of stuff? How much effort did they put into that versus like just the exploration and the actual combat aspects of it, like skills and upgrading your abilities or whatever. That seems fun.
Yeah, I think that with looting works and getting upgrades, and I mean that's just like a part of video game DNA. But I'm always shocked when they don't streamline stuff. Like, you should make it, especially when you're going to be spending a huge chunk of the game doing it. Like, having to stop and press a button to pick shit up, or it not kind of like automatically come to you, and things not like duplicates not automatically breaking down. There are some games where I fucking would dread it, because I'm like, I've got to go to the menu and I got to look at these things and which one's better. You know, like the old problem. I don't know how much you've played JRPGs, but like old Final Fantasy games, what used to be a real issue is you would go to the new town, there'd be the better weapons, and you'd go, I don't know if this weapon is better. I don't know if I already own this. Now I'm selling weapons. I don't know if these are equipped. And they eventually figured it out. But it took them a long time. And it was a pain. And I mean, when you only had like 4 good games a year, you didn't mind that, and it was kind of fun. But now that you got Destiny and Borderlands and games that have kind of perfected this stuff. I mean, you're a big Borderlands player. Did they figure out loot pretty well in that? Because I mean, that game's kind of based on that, right?
They figured out, well, they made like much more variety. There's much more variety than there was in the previous game. The only thing that I find is just a little bit rough in a lot of these kind of games where they rely on loot is they take away player agency a little bit, or they don't give the player enough agency. Like, if you have guns, right, in a game like Borderlands, theoretically I think you'd be able to just take stuff apart, and as long as it's compatible with other guns, bolt it on there. I don't want to have to like find something like that. And then also just giving items, like, I find that if you give an item a level, and you can kind of outgrow that later, I find that a little bit annoying too, because you find something that's really good, and then all of a sudden that's no longer ever useful. It doesn't retain even a hint of its original value, because the only way you're going to ever feel that again is if you use it with like another character, if you can transfer stuff across to a new character in whatever game you're talking about. I find that kind of stuff, it's just a little bit grating. Whereas if the loot itself didn't have like a set level to it, it didn't have like a limiting factor like that, I might like it a little bit more, because at least then I feel like I'm making some progress. I'm actually accomplishing something. I'm not just delaying the inevitable,
Yeah, cool. Because you've spent all this time sort of like upgrading it and working with it, and then all of a sudden you go, okay, well that thing's useless. Something good they did in Resident Evil Village, without spoiling, is that you upgrade your weapons, which I put everything into damage, because to me that felt like the bullets were gonna be more meaningful. When I was still playing it, like bullets, and actually a lot of the time they give you a ton of ammo, and then other times in the game they take it away, and then you get to a point where they just give you these weapons that are a lot better. But they do give you a huge amount of money for selling the previous guns. So I felt like that was rewarded. Like, everything that I put into it was valuable. But yeah, you need to respect people's time. And you need to think of everything you do in this game. people are going to have to do those actions over and over and over and over again. It's kind of like when I constantly complain about using Microsoft Windows, is that, okay, well, there might be a small problem with opening up something. It's not a big issue. But if you have to do that 1,000 times or 100 times for your job, like that can get pretty annoying. And games, you need to think about that. Like, that's why humor in video games is really hard to do, because how many times does this happen? They put a big cutscene before a boss, right? And it's like, I wonder where you thought I was going, but let me get this out real quick. Huge cutscene before the boss, and then you die at the boss, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to have to hear this fucking dialogue over and over and over again. So if it was a joke, that would be even more difficult. But what did you think I was going with?
No, I was just thinking that's like fairly tropey, and it also just happens when you have characters in games that have voice lines every time you like you kill an enemy or something.
Yeah,
it's like
I'm doing it.
They do their little line, and then
coming right up.
It's just like, oh God,
that happens a lot.
Thought of that.
That happens a lot in like Marvel versus Capcom and those kind of fighting games. I can still remember Psylocke, such a beautiful character. Every time she shoots, she goes, "Psy shot, Psy shot, Psy shot." And Wolverine, "Berserker barrage, Berserker barrage." And it's like someone doing like a prank call and pressing the soundboard or something. And of course, like Hadouken.
Oh yeah. Somehow it wasn't as grating in like at least in
No, it just felt like it was the soundtrack. A lot of like the most polished games will integrate all the sound effects and stuff and make it musical in a way. Like if you think of a Mario game, if there's 10 things you got to jump on, they're going to go up in pitch. Bum, 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 bum. And I just love when games think, let's make everything work together. Like the UI in Persona 5 being a great example. What if all the UI was artistic and worked well, and you can play around with the music, and when Mario gets on Yoshi, you add kungas to the soundtrack. and I never noticed that till way later, until it was pointed out to me.
It even goes with animations too, because I was thinking about like sometimes, well, the Resident Evil gameplay makes me think of it because that was the most recent thing I'm thinking about there.
Mm-hmm.
But like when animations get synced up, like when you have two enemies that fall over and they both go in like perfect, like synchronized swimmer level, synchronization. It was just ridiculous when that happens.
Yeah, it's like, could you not have overlapped that, or made one of them go in reverse or something like that? Never came up in your testing that the enemies, there could be 4 of them, and they see you and they all do the same like wind up, and you go like, just randomize it somehow. You have to be able to sort of like procedurally generate that animation. Just make it go backwards, something, or like they'll all make the same kind of sound effect or something.
Yeah, I think that's a good representation of like a lot of stuff in games. And in projects in general, I've seen is what, like 10% of your time goes toward 90% of the work, and then 90% of your time goes to the last 10% of the work.
Absolutely, yep, that's true. It's those last little details, putting it all together. Well, thanks a lot, Horky, for joining.
Yeah, it was fun.
I had a lot of fun. We're gonna try and make this a weekly thing, I think, if you can swing it, and doing the same kind of deal, talking about what we're playing, gaming news, really breaking the mold. 2 white guys talking about video games. And yeah, but I always enjoy your perspective on this stuff. So this is, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's also available on our podcast, A 90s Kid. If you're listening to the podcast, this is on YouTube. The spoiler section that we were talking about will not be in the podcast. So if you want to check that out, go to the YouTube video and go to 10 minutes and 58 seconds in, where we talk about the spoiler sections of Resident Evil Village. All right. Goodbye.
See ya.